Welcome back to You Ask For It. It's a podcast that Pastor Steve and myself do where we sometimes walk through your questions that you have, but right now we're doing a series through the Apostles' Creed, and we're coming to what is arguably, or is the most controversial line in the Apostles' Creed. It says that after talking about Jesus dying and then being buried, the current version of the creed adds, he descended into hell. Now, the creed that we have today is not the same creed that originated 100 AD. The earliest versions of this do not have this line in it. And say the earliest that we actually see this line is with 390 AD.
Yeah, 390, right.
And then what about 60 AD is when...
650.
650 AD is when it became kind of standard here.
So people really didn't say descended into hell until long into Christian history.
But today, majority of Christians do say this line when they say the Apostles' Creed. And so because of that, we want to address this line in the podcast today. You'll find many opinions on what this actually meant. We're going to look through those different opinions today, not necessarily affirming any of them, but we're going to look through those opinions. And I'm going to start first with John Calvin. John Calvin said that descended into hell referred back to the 6 hours on the cross when Jesus died. Jesus cried out saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? And what was said about this is that Jesus not only suffered bodily, but also all the torments that a soul in hell would have suffered, being cut off from God's presence. Here's what he says about it in his Institutes. He says, surely no more terrible abyss can be conceived than to feel yourself forsaken and estranged from God. And when you call upon him, not to be heard. It is as if God himself had plotted your ruin. So he would take the phrase descend into hell and interpret it that way. John Piper would be on the other end of the spectrum in this, where he would say that he would leave this line completely out of the creed. He would say, after all, we go by the Bible, not necessarily by our creed, but our faith. And here's what he says about the text. He says, there is no textual basis in the New Testament for claiming that between Good Friday and Easter, Christ was preaching to souls imprisoned in hell or Hades. For these and other reasons, it seems best to me to omit from the Apostles' Creed the clause, he descended into hell, rather than giving it other meanings that are more defensible, for instance, the way that Calvin does.
And many of you may have been in churches. There are whole denominations now that when they recite the creed, they leave the phrase, he descended into hell. Just leave it off. They go from, he was crucified, dead, and buried. On the third day, rose again from the dead. So they just leave it off. Now, let me tell you what it can't mean. It can't mean that Jesus, after he died, went to hell. Jesus' last words, according to John, in John 19:30, said when he'd received the sour wine, he said, it is finished. And then bowing his head, he gave up his spirit. The word it is finished, by the way, was a word that was used in the marketplace. If you had paid off a bill, they would write, it is finished, to telestai on it, paid in full. So when he'd finished suffering those 6 hours on the cross, there was nothing left to suffer. He didn't have to go to hell and continue to suffer because it was all over. It was finished. He had done it. We can see 1 Peter 3:18. For Christ also suffered for sins once for all, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he may bring you to God. He was put to death in the flesh, but made alive by the Spirit. That once for all death was over. It was done. All that needed to be done for our salvation was over at 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon. There was nothing left to pay. We do know, in fact, that there's proof that it was enough, that it was paid in full, because one detail of the cross is this. Do you remember after he said that, cried out with a loud voice, Mark tells us that all of a sudden the ground shook and the temple that separated the Holy of Holies from the outside was torn in two from top to bottom. And that's God saying, we're no longer separated. Come on in. This death paid the debt so completely that we can just go right into his presence. So without a doubt, he did not go to hell after his cross. In fact, we know from his own words where he went after he hung his head down. He turned to the thief on the cross and said, this day you'll be with me in paradise. So he didn't descend into hell. He took the thief with him to paradise.
And on the sermons that D. James Kennedy does on the Apostles' Creed, he takes a different approach than the other two. He would say this line simply means that Jesus was really dead. You see, the creed was first written in Greek. That was the language that was spoken by the majority at that time. And the Greek word that we translate as hell in the recent creeds is actually the word Hades. Now, that's not the technical word for hell. Gehenna is the technical word for hell. And Hades, we see, when Jesus tells the story, gives the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, and he talks about the place of torment, he uses the word Hades from there, but technically, this word Hades was spoken of as the place of the dead. So Kennedy says that this line simply means that Jesus really died and went to the place of the dead until Sunday morning, is what he would say. And the Revised Book of Common Prayer actually uses these words. It says, he descended to the dead. And in the Westminster Larger Catechism, it says that what we mean is that Jesus Christ was buried and continued in the state of the dead until the third day. It's a way of reminding us that Jesus, as the second Adam, as a human being, truly did die and lay in the bands of death until he burst them at the resurrection. This is all that it is meant by he descended into hell. So those are three different places we see that affirmed. And we would actually say this also adds as a great defense of the attempts to try to explain away the resurrection.
Kennedy said he was really dead.
Yes. So like the swoon theory, maybe some of you have heard of the swoon theory in here. It was this belief that Jesus didn't actually die, that after coming off the cross, he was just so low physically that it looked as if he was dead. But then, after he'd gone into the tomb and sat in a cool tomb for a few days, he regained his strength and was able to walk out of the tomb as if he had resurrected. The problem with this is a couple of things.
Bunch of them.
Yeah, well, a few I'm going to point out. One, the main problem with this is that it was a professional executioner who said that he was dead. Mm-hmm. This is his job to do this. He did this regularly. Mm-hmm. This is what he did. Second of all, if you remember, when Jesus was stabbed with the spear, it said that water and blood came out onto him. And so what that even proves is that after his death, there'd been the separation of the fluids in his body. Mm-hmm. So you had the water and the blood that was present there. And so I think that's important for us to see that this would affirm.
In the 1960s, there was a book called The Passover Plot that tried to push the swoon theory and said he fooled them. That he revived, and then he made him think, well, think about this. There was this huge stone put in front of him. Did he revive enough to push a several-ton stone out of the way too? I mean, it's foolishness. Yeah. Now, so James Kennedy, the Westminster Confession, said all this means is that he stayed in the place of the dead. He just died. He stayed in the state of death from Friday at 3 until Sunday when he rose. But there's hints. Now, I don't want to be dogmatic on this, but there's hints that he was active in that time. We already have him saying, I'm going to take you with me to paradise. So that's an active action. And so let me give you, we're going to go over a couple of thoughts of what he might have been doing from Friday at 3 until Easter Sunday morning.
And these are pretty interesting.
Number one, Jesus may have been sharing the gospel with the Old Testament believers who died in faith before he came. Let me give you a verse that hints at that. 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 6. For this reason, the gospel was also preached to those who are now dead, so that although they may be judged in the flesh according to human standards, they might live in the spirit according to God's standards. Now, all of us who sin, the wages of sin is death. So these are people who've already paid the wage of sin. They've died. But he went and preached to those who have already died so that now they can live. Now, let me explain what this does not mean. This does not mean that he gave a second chance for anyone who had already died. The Bible says it's appointed unto us once to die, and after that, the judgment. If you remember the story of the rich man Lazarus that Justin has already referred to, Lazarus was in the place of torment in the flame. The rich man was, and Lazarus was in the bosom of Abraham. And we were told by Abraham, there's a great gulf fixed, and no one goes from this side to the other. Once you die, there's never a chance to be saved again. But the Greek word that's used here, when it said that the gospel was also preached, that's several words together. It's one word in the Greek. It said he went and gospeled. He took the word for gospel and turned it into a verb. He went and gospeled to those who had died. So I think what this might mean is this, that he went to the place where all the Old Testament believers who died in faith were. And he said, I want to fill in the blanks for you. Abraham, you remember those promises I gave you that you would become a blessing? This is how. Because I've died, I've risen, now your seed has become the blessing. Moses, you remember how I laid it out for you to sacrifice those lambs for sins in the Holy of Holies? I'm the lamb. Isaiah, I'm the suffering servant in Isaiah 53. Daniel, I'm the Son of Man who's coming in glory. So it's like he went there and he gave them the good news. It's not that he gave somebody another chance, but he filled in the blanks for those who had died.
Now, there is another one that's interesting, another kind of...
We're not going to endorse this one. But
No, this one is definitely an interesting one. That is one that's held to many, that Jesus may have preached a message of strong condemnation to the angels that caused the flood of the earth, is another kind of stance that people take. I'm going to show you 1 Peter 3. So the passage literally right before the one we just read, it says, in which he also went and made proclamation to the spirits in prison who in the past were disobedient, when God patiently waited in the days of Noah while the ark was being prepared. In it few, that is 8 people, were saved through the water. So this speaks of Jesus going and making proclamation to spirits who've been disobedient. Now, angels, both fallen and non-fallen, are called angels.
Or they're called spirits.
Called spirits, I'm sorry. And many believe that the sons of the angels, or the sons of God who took the daughters of men in Genesis 6 that you read about, that became the Nephilim, they believe those are angels who had relations with human wives, and in that they created this horrible race, the Nephilim, and because of that, the earth had to be wiped clean, is what we see in Genesis 6. God says that it had gotten so bad that he couldn't even stand to look at it anymore. And that it is those specific angels who are maybe mentioned in Jude verse 6. It says, and the angels who did not keep their own position, but abandoned their proper dwelling, he has kept in eternal chains in deep darkness for the judgment on the great day. Now, the difference that we see here than chapter 4 is the word for preaching. It was gospel that was used there. This is the word for proclamation, or caruso is what the Greek word is. And this was words used for a royal proclamation, or maybe even a proclamation of condemnation. It would be like if a king and an army surrounded a city, and then he proclaimed to them, you've messed up and you're going to pay for it now. And so the belief here would be that Jesus in his death time went and proclaimed to those angels, you messed up. And this is what you're going to receive. You're going to receive payment because of it.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, I think that's probably got the shakiest foundation, but we're trying to give y'all everything that's out there because after all, y'all are Wednesday night people and you like that. But there's one other thing that I like this one. During the time between Friday and Sunday, Jesus may have led a triumph parade in the land of the dead. And let me tell you where this comes from and how that use of the word triumph is there. Colossians 2:14. He erased the certificate of debt with its obligations that was against us and opposed to us, and has taken it away by nailing it to the cross. He disarmed the rulers in authority, disgraced them publicly. He triumphed over them in him. So here it said that when he died on the cross, he went and triumphed over the demonic powers that had defied Almighty God. That word triumph is a specific word in Roman culture. When the Roman generals won a great victory, they would come back to Rome and they would give them a victory parade. Titus, when he destroyed Jerusalem in AD 70, came back and they gave him a, quote, Roman triumph. And it says, what you would do is you would take some of your soldiers and they'd rejoice with you. You'd take some of the ones that you'd captured and they'd be in chains and they would be in disgrace. And so it's like you get the impression from Colossians that Jesus went down, grabbed some fallen angels, put them in chains, drug them through eternity and said, I won, victory parade time. They lost. That could have happened. But let me tell you what I think the best thing to do. I'm with those who say just drop the line. Because it wasn't even in there until nearly 400, and it didn't become standard until the 600s. I think that, and I use the Apostles' Creed when I do a lot of times in my own private devotion, because it helps me go through all the facts of Christianity and the gospel. And I, in my own private life, I go, he was crucified, dead, and buried, and on the third day rose from the dead. I never used that particular line. And
I would say why we can do that is because it's not a first-tier issue. You know, we talk often about the main things. What are the main things? Those that define our salvation, those that speak to the reliability of the Scriptures.
And clearly taught in Scripture.
Yes, clearly taught in the Scriptures. And the good thing about this is that it is not something that everybody agrees upon. And so because of that, it's okay. And also, it's not, the creed is not the creed is not the Bible. It's derived from the Bible. And so because of that, we can let go of it. And we're not the only ones to do it. There's many other denominations that do that as well. And so, and what better person to follow than Pastor Steve himself? And if he doesn't do it, then why not us as well, right? So there you go. Yeah. Hey, thank you for joining us today. I hope this has been an interesting discussion for you as we have just tried to navigate a difficult topic in the Apostles' Creed. I hope this answered some questions that maybe you have on this very phrase. Be back with us in 2 weeks as we'll enter into the talks about the resurrection of Jesus, and it'll be great. Thanks for joining.